Welcome to Transformation Tales, a podcast by Shanda, where we celebrate the heroic journeys of storytellers. I am your host, Dumi Mabena, and each week we'll bring you inspiring stories of creators who found their voice, overcame challenges, and transformed through the power of podcasting. Get ready to be motivated as we explore the growth and triumphs and the amazing stories of the people that inspire us to do what we do. Irini, thank you so much for making the time to speak with me again. Well, this time it's me asking you questions as opposed to the other way around. So how have you been since we last spoke?
Well, it's so weird for me to be the one that's interviewed. Usually it's the other way around, but I've been great, and it's such a blessing to hear from you again and to see that Shanda's growing, and I'm really excited to help in any way I can and be part of the conversation. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you. The pleasure is mine. And I know the last time we spoke, you were about to go traveling to different parts of the world. So tell us about where you've been over the past, I think, has it been a couple of months or so?
Yeah. So ever since we interviewed, we were back in Georgetown, and we were finishing spring semester. I have to go back for another semester up until December, but I layovered in Doha on the way to Kenya and was in the African Development Bank conference, uh, like their annual conference meetings, where I got to interview a few more founders for the Vertigo podcast. So that was cool, and got to explore Eastern African markets, especially in the startup world and infrastructure development world, which was really interesting. And then I came back to Madrid to attend a few venture conferences. So I've been like around Spain attending different digital and venture conferences like South Summit, which has its own startup competition. So it's been a busy month of work.
I love that though. But I think it's important work, which is good. But I want to find out why Kenya. And of course, everyone, for those who don't know me, I'm a Zimbabwean, which is of course in Southern Africa. But yeah, I think I'm pretty excited. Why did you want to go to Kenya for the African Development Bank? Why there as opposed to somewhere else first?
Wait, actually, you might want to cut this part out, but I met somebody that you knew. Actually.
Really?
Yeah, because I mentioned you because startup, like I was like, oh, do me. And they were like, oh no, we're from Zimbabwe, and we know, I think her husband was a diplomat or something.
Really?
But like they
That's so
know
wild.
her or something. Yeah. So just a fun fact. I'll try to like remember the name because I was
Wow.
gonna text you about it. But why Kenya? Well, my uncle works for the African Development Bank, and he manages their events. And I was planning to just go and support him. Like that sometimes in the summer, especially, we go and we visit him. But it was actually comprehensively like reasonable for all of our jobs, like the whole family, like my uncles, my father, and my aunt to attend this conference.
Wow.
I was attending for the startup and the market research side of it. My father was attending for like deals that he was doing, and my uncle's a diplomat. So it was interesting because we all went kind of for work in the same place. And
Right.
obviously, like I'm 22, my tickets were paid by them, you take the chance, and
Right.
instead of going to the spouse program or chilling in the hotel, I decided to like book interviews while I was there. And that's kind of what Vertigo stemmed from as a whole, just me having the opportunity or opportunities to travel somewhere or go to a conference thanks to um the work of one of my parents or the work of my friends, and make the most out of it. So
I love that. I love
so
that.
that's the answer to why Kenya. It wasn't that I got invited or anything.
But I think it's cool that that you took the opportunity to be like, look, I'm here and I could just be chilling, but let me go and learn and speak to people, hear about how they think in this part of the world and how they tackle problems in their own specific
I
way.
mean, I think anywhere like LinkedIn is just such a powerful tool nowadays. And I just had been blessed with being able to travel because of school
Mhm.
and because of accompanying like different members of my family to places um for fun. So I was like, I'll just look up founder on LinkedIn, look up the location and see who I can find. And I would always find that I had people in common or one person in common with someone. So I would start there. And then any companies that looked interesting, I would reach out to. And most of them didn't answer, but 3 to 5 of them did. And
Mhm.
those were people that I would interview and then filter through. And yeah.
That's awesome. Maybe for everyone listening, let's talk about Vertigo. In fact, no, even before we talk about Vertigo, let's introduce you. Who is Irini? Where does she come from? Where is she right now? And then we'll get into Vertigo after that. Maybe introduce yourself so everyone listening knows.
Oh, so hello everyone. My name is Irini. I'm half Spanish, half Greek. I grew up in Madrid. Madrid is my home. Um, and I study in Georgetown University. I'm finishing my undergrad right now. Um, I had a huge passion for international relations that took me to actually speak in the UN at the age of 17.
Wow.
But then I wanted to partner it with technology, and I always I wanted to be closer to the creation of things.
Mm,
And so I ended up founding my own podcast where I would interview interesting people that I would meet at the library at Georgetown.
mm,
Um, we had access to a production studio in the university, so I just did that. And I was able to take that podcast worldwide through my own investment thesis,
mhm,
where I state that founder psychology at times might be, especially at the earliest stages, might be even more important than financial metric potential. Because if a founder doesn't have the strategic vision behind their behind their project, it doesn't matter how much potential the project is going to have. If the founder is not there, it's not it, then the project will collapse. And in the worst of cases, even if the project collapses due to founder psychology, the next project won't. So
mm.
that's kind of the investment thesis that I developed that I'm now able to leverage to monetize the podcast by connecting the entrepreneurs that I interviewed with interested early investors and angel investors. So that's a little bit of the gist of Vertigo and who I am.
That's incredible. I want to first start with the name Vertigo. Let's unpack that first. Why the
Well,
name Vertigo? Mm, mm, mm.
so the name, I mean, the name came up because I was already thinking of interviewing people that I found interesting. And I was thinking of how I would title an interview that I was planning with, and that didn't end up happening because sometimes you like try to plan interviews, but people
Right.
are busy. But that I was planning with the Secretary of State of Artificial Intelligence and like development at the time called
Mhm,
Carmen Piras. And I wanted to speak to her, or I was thinking of the concept of the world's digitalization. And so to
mhm,
title that, I titled it The Vertigo of Digitalization. And I kind of thought back and I was like, why vertigo? Like, why did that word come out? And so the real definition of vertigo ended up being that vertigo is a fear of heights. You know, it's kind of that fear that you get when you're looking at a precipice.
mhm,
The fear, if there's somebody behind you who wants to play a joke and like fake push you, you would like scream.
mhm,
But it's also a feeling that's delineated in many books as a feeling of being very present in the moment when you have that fear and being really in touch with with the blockages that you might have inside. And so I wanted to put a definition to like that kind of fear translates into the startup world when somebody is thinking of really betting on themselves and betting on their idea to take it on. and to see it through and put their money where their mouth is, kind of. And
Yes.
so and so Vertigo actually, what it means is a fear to create and a fear and the fear to take things on. And what I start when I started Vertigo, what I was trying to tackle is what differentiates certain founders from other like what differentiates certain founders that actually took their business on successfully from founders from not even founders, from people that don't have the guts, or
Mm,
people didn't take it on successfully.
mm.
That's kind of what I was trying to define. But in a nutshell, vertigo means a fear to create, a fear for a certain milestone, a fear to throw yourself into a project. That's what it means.
Oof, that's deep.
I
That's
know.
deep. And thank you so much for doing it. I guess I have two questions. The first of it is in the library, at what point does it dawn on you to like meet people? Of course, I've been to the library many of times, but usually I'm just going into a cubicle and just doing my work. With you, at what point is it like, I'm meeting all these cool people. Maybe I capture all of these interesting perspectives I'm hearing in
Mhm.
Vertigo. Like, how does that even come about? Do you just like hang around the printer? Like, how does that happen?
In terms of like getting the idea to actually go to a production studio and like record interviews, it was more because my roommate wasn't like was the head of multimedia at the Georgetown newspaper, The Hoya,
Mm,
and she was doing audio only, like she was playing with audio only podcasts already. And so I thought, why not audio visual? It was just starting to become a trend. And so that was in my mind. But um the step of actually speaking to people and not going straight to the cubicle,
mm,
um I'm trying to think of the people that I interviewed. I think a very good example of one time where it literally like showcases how it happened was I was at a cubicle studying for an accounting exam. Everyone knows this level of accounting, like you need like you need several matchas for that. Uh, and so I was coming in and out of the cafeteria on the second floor and back into my cubicle, and I was running out of battery, and suddenly I come out, and I'm a very extroverted person. I'm the type that I will talk to anybody if
mm.
I like the shirt, or if I've never seen that sort of mug before. I talk to people for the randomest stuff. And it's not uncommon for people to kind of look at me like, why are you talking to me? But this one time I needed a charger, and my idea was just to go outside and like go get out of the cubicle and be like, does anyone have a charger? Literally. And so I come out of the cubicle and I kind of scan the room and I see this one guy, and I don't think I've ever seen somebody more plugged in their life. He had a charger for his MacBook, a charger for his like Mac, a charger for his iPad that like connected to his MacBook. Then like he had like two types of headphones and a charger for each. So I was like, this guy, I'm sure he has an extra charger. And so that's kind of, I went up to him and I'm like, you look like you have a charger. And so I looked at his screen, and that's kind of how the conversation started. Oh, what are you building? And in this case, he's my dear friend Logan, and
Wow.
he building a think tank. Um, and so we got into like a conversation. It's also avoiding work sometimes. Those conversations
That's
come up with in a desperate avoidance of working. Um,
oh,
but
funny. That's funny, but worth it. I think
yeah,
it's like different. Yeah, in the library, but it's a different type of learning in a way. Like I'm still
yeah.
learning from my peers, which is
Also, another thing that I just about the library was the reason why I focused on the library, because like this can happen when you're a lot more prone to socialize, like at a party, for example. But what I kept seeing time and time again in the library was that in those like lazy study breaks where you're just stopping by the cafeteria to get a cup of coffee,
mm,
I would have some of the most like not deeper conversations, but a lot more realer conversations
Mm.
with more driven people than I
Mm.
would at the parties. At a party, people just want to socialize. They don't want to talk about work. But
Mm.
suddenly, like, you can at the library, you can ask somebody like, "Oh, what are you studying?" And then suddenly you see their eyes light up about one specific thing, and you ask them further about that, and you learn so
Mm.
much from. So yeah.
I love that you use that as the place and have that insight. That's super cool. So we're at the library. We fall upon a name, not fall upon. We intentionally choose a name. So we Vertigo is the name. Okay, cool. The question I had for you is, what made you interested in that? Like that as a subject matter. This idea that there are certain people who have ideas, or certain people that act upon them, and I want to study the psychology behind the people that choose to act upon them. Like why that as a subject matter? It's very specific, you know.
Hmm. Um. Okay. The way that it happened to be like what Vertigo is now was a niching out of what it was before and realizing the success rate of the people that I had already interviewed. So at the beginning, it was just, I want to interview an interesting person.
Mm.
Like, I don't care if you're an athlete. We talked about how I think that the discipline
Yeah.
behind athletes like you are a former athlete is really interesting.
Mm.
I don't care if you're an artist. I just want your eyes to light up about what you're talking about. I want to notice that you're awake and that
Mm.
you have a strategic way that you're carrying it through and that it's like contributing to your life, to your peace, or to your life in a way that makes you feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that I think was where I would find people interesting. But
Mhm.
then slowly but surely, the more and more people that I interviewed randomly without classifying them as founders or anything would start starting their own companies.
Mm.
So I would interview people because I found them cool.
Mhm.
And then a big percentage of those would start their own companies successfully, like leveraging several rounds of investment. And I thought this might be just a coincidence. It's a really high rate of people doing it, but it might just be coincidence. Um, I like to say that the rate was in between like 20 and 35%, but I don't want to like
Right.
I don't I don't know. I haven't done I need to like actually do the math, but
Yes.
like roughly 20 to 25 to 35% successfully like would start a startup. And this was before I even like niched out to just founders, right?
Mm.
And so I kept doing it because I thought that it was cool. And then slowly I like started just interviewing entrepreneurs just to make sure that it was niched out.
Mhm.
And I realized that it wasn't because like the reason why a lot of people were successful wasn't or a lot of the interviews that I would undertake were successful wasn't because I would approach them as founders. Like wasn't because like it was the first thought wasn't you're a founder, you're raising money, I'm
Yeah.
gonna approach
Yeah.
you. It
Mhm.
was do I like do does your vision speak to me? Are you awake?
Mhm.
And so that's when I realized the founder psychology thing. And that's when I wanted to delineate what specifically was it about their psychology that was making them successful. I think that's the best explanation that I
That's
can
great.
give.
And what did you learn? What did you learn?
Ooh, yeah, so that's actually I'm trying to gather all of the qualitative insights into like a report.
Mhm.
But a lot of the one of the things that I learned to my dismice, can you say that?
Right.
To my disappointment, one of the things that I learned was that a lot of the founders that I would interview that were very successful about being on their objectives were type A, very organized, like obsessively organized people. And a habit that a lot of them had, and I've like developed into my own sort of way of being now, is that super detailed Google Calendar. Like every part of their day was the like
Yeah.
planned That
Yeah.
was one thing that the people that were strategic about actually getting their thought process and their ideas through a Google Calendar with like spaced out what I have to do during the day was crucial, because then every part of their day had productivity in it, and they would even schedule their rest, and their rest was even more restful. So I think that's a little like crazy, but hey, it works. It works. I've tried it. What else? Another thing that I noticed was that they were passionate about like not what they were doing as like the category of their industry, but more about a wider message that they wanted to achieve, or a wider service that they wanted to accomplish. Like, for example, in my case, I'm passionate about bringing voice and bringing ideas to light and giving people a voice, um that like giving people a voice for their ideas. I'm not passionate about the finance industry at all. I'm not passionate about the numbers
Hmm.
behind like a venture capital deal.
Hmm.
But I just happened to stumble onto VC, not because of because of what was missing, which was the psychological filtering and the psychological analysis.
Hmm.
So I've seen that a lot of founders, especially founders of startups, they kind of stumble into industries that they didn't expect
Yeah.
to stumble into, or into categories or cohorts. Like there was this one forestry um company that stumbled into the real estate category because and they were filling a hole. So it's less about being really passionate about one thing, and it's more about being passionate about a movement towards something.
Mm. Like that momentum, the itch to whether it's solve a problem or lean into something,
Mhm.
and then oh wow, this is what this is now. It wasn't what I anticipated, but now that I'm here, then maybe I want to push it further.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that's really fascinating because I think, and it's nice that you also don't just do it for yourself. You also capture it and share it with people, which is even better. And I guess what has been the feedback that you've gotten off this the stories that you've captured? Um, and by feedback, I mean, I guess, really, I think you do it for you, like most people make podcasts, but at the same time, you are making a public good. So at the same time, people will have a benefit of it. So what has been the feedback? I mean, I've listened to it, but maybe I'll give you feedback about the one that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, why
Yeah,
don't we
yeah.
start with
I enjoyed I forget her name, but she spoke about discipline, the intersection between art and discipline. I think her name,
yeah,
she worked with
and
her parents. Yes, her parents have like a law firm, and she also is a bit of she's an artist, and we talked about discipline a lot, and I loved that because often you never hear. I think we spoke about this when we met, the intersection between art, but then discipline, more importantly, being an even more important driving factor in being an effective artist. But that was one I really enjoyed the most. But so well done on that. But in general, what do you find that people have enjoyed the most from what you've shared?
yeah, well, about that, just and you can cut this off if you want, but I th- I am I'm an artist that just happens to be a founder.
Mm.
And you're an athlete that happens to be an entrepreneur himself. I think that part never leaves us. And it's the discipline behind it, whether it be the discipline between running, like behind running another lap, or the discipline between doing another take
Mm.
in piano. It's that again, again, until it's perfect, that I think that there's a little artist or a little athlete in a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed. It's also the ones that I connected with because they connect with like my own sort of, I think it's the closest you get to truth. So
Mm.
just wanted to say that.
What discipline itself.
Yeah, no, I think no, it's like a love for something that's like that you would do for free, literally. It's what allows you to be a successful found, like having that like background. Anyways, in terms of what people have liked, it's interesting. I've had like what has come from the podcast, and what has allowed me to monetize it actually, is that a lot of the founders themselves have listened to other podcasts and have connected. So like suddenly, like I interview somebody who's has a similar sort of venture to the person that I interviewed before, I put them in touch. A lot of investors were listening in, and they asked me to be put in touch with one of the people that I spoke to and to have access to the next people that I was interviewing as well. So in terms of benefits, like for the podcast, I mean, that was great because like I was able to sort of make a marketplace or a business out of it. In
Right.
terms of the audience and general, like what people liked, people really liked one as like the structure of the podcast as a whole. The podcast is structured with business talk, like explain your business model and how you got it from ideation to execution. And then the other half is explain your psychology, or delve into how people think. So that general structure is a structure that people enjoy. The Discipline in Art podcast is very popular. There's another one about forestry with a girl called Costanza. It's episode 18, I think. That one is really popular as well. I started introducing a bunch of Spanish podcasts. So like a lot of Spanish speakers were listening to the last podcast I introduced, which was about this Spanish guy that started his own satellite like telecommunications company, which is a very hard industry to penetrate. And then a lot of like viewers that weren't startup founders enjoyed one about career transitioning with a girl called Pauline that I did in Indonesia, because it spoke to their own struggle of I'm thinking of transitioning career paths, or I'm thinking of like starting my own thing, and this woman kind of delineates the emotional process that goes behind it. So that those are the popular ones. And also my dear friend now, Bazart, he talks that's episode number 3.
Mhm.
He talks a lot about going in and out of university. So that's a popular one as well for like just student viewers, because they like start playing with the concept of, okay, like can I like work and then come back to study? Like how do I manage that?
Mm. Mm.
So
That's great. And I want to talk about as well, monetization. And I say that because for example, when I started my podcast, I just purely had a desire to tell perspectives and stories that I didn't hear growing up from where I come from. And that was just a pure desire with that. And then, I was at episode 10, I did like a fundraiser during the pandemic to say, okay, how can we do a fundraiser to send some kids to school, to help out one of my guests who did this as a job. She helped send kids to school, and we did like a little fundraiser. And our community listeners, sent money. And I was like, whoa, it was an experiment. And then that happened. Then I was like, well, what if I reach out to a sponsor? And then a friend sponsored. I was like, well, okay. So I realized that there's this thing that you do, which is tell a story and propel it to the world. But then you build an audience that is engaged, and that not only wants to listen, but also is willing to support initiatives, whether that's financial or whatever way, how, right? So that was an interesting insight for me. So I guess the question I have for you, monetization, when you started, was that ever a consideration, or was it mainly like, look, how has that journey evolved from the beginning to like now, where you're like, wait a minute, maybe I can add more value, I capture more value
hmm,
with the thing.
it's, you know, and this is such a cliche. Like I hate that I'm saying this, but if you do something that you like enough, or if you keep a project going enough, and if you're truly adding value, the money will come. The money will come. And I actually avoided monetization for a really long time because my main purpose was to prioritize the audience or the startups or the customer before I prioritized anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually, even in this stage where I'm beginning to monetize things by connecting investors to founders,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel comfortable. Like I didn't feel entirely comfortable coming up with how I would charge for the deals themselves, because I wanted to make sure that any money that I would make wouldn't take away from the actual goal, which was connection,
Mm,
you know?
mhm,
So so no, it was never in my mind. Um, I think that people build products. When you're building a product, it's a lot different.
mhm,
Um, I think that when people start podcasts, we were actually talking about this with in a panel yesterday morning with a few um women entrepreneurs in Kenya. Um, and she's a community manager for this like podcast platform, which I'll put you in touch with her. But she said that like a lot of people, they don't start podcasts just to start a podcast. Usually it's brands that already have a revenue like established that like kind of extrapolate into a podcast to build community or to enhance their sales funnel.
mm,
Or it might be like, yeah, usually it's kind of that type of thing.
mm,
It's a bit daft to start a podcast, just the podcast, because it has no direct monetization, um, like monetization potential. So yeah, have I answered the question? I
yeah,
think.
you have. And it's a weird, interesting one because, yeah, it's an interesting medium because with a lot of mediums, well, actually, no, human beings have a natural desire to express themselves, just
Yeah.
to be genuine. And we do this purely for expression. However, sometimes I think because also the tools aren't there to show us that, hey, for example, we're creating a product which is digital that people are happy to consume and enjoy and nourish themselves with, and that's they use their time to do that, and that's kind of like a huge thing in and of itself. I guess where I feel like the industry is that in maybe medium. I think what I've seen people do is some people might be like, hey, it's kind of costing me a little bit to make this thing. I'm going to go to Patreon and then see people who want to support me and they can, donate what X amount a month there. And then people are doing it there. So I think the tools are there, but it's kind of not standardized, if I can call it that. It's kind of very informal. If you want to do it for free, yeah, do it for free. Or if you want to do Substack, yeah, do that. Or if you want to do Patreon, yeah, it's kind of like happening, but it's not standardized. And even monetization is it's not a one word thing. You might do, let's say, marketplace connections. Another person might do sponsorship. Another person might do um, direct subscriptions from the audience. So it's kind of such a broad term. And I think the standardization of it is still kind of very murky and gray. And I don't know the answer to it yet, but it's interesting,
But like I think that like that's I mean, I was working at a big tech, and the a big part of the projects are standardizing processes, automating processes,
Mm-hmm.
digitalizing processes.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the venture, like in the startup world, especially at the earliest stage,
Mm-hmm.
there's just some things that need to be what they are. They need to be individual. They need to have a life of their own. Um, and yes, like standardization has worked great for a lot of different industries but even in consulting, which
Mm-hmm.
is the most it's a very standardized driven, it's very driven by its schemes, like
Mm-hmm.
different schemes and ways to tackle its schemes. And it's always good to have frameworks to do things. I
Mm-hmm.
think that nowadays we're falling into the framework trap where we're like there needs to be we look at the framework, or we ask ChatGPT to create a framework before we can even think about what we actually need for the project ourselves. And it's a creativity killer. And so I'm a big advocate of, while I see what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big advocate of, especially in the early stage startup world, start with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on the customer's needs. Write them down. Have a customer profile that you have created from scratch. And then if you want, then help yourself with the frameworks, like standard, like help use the frameworks to help you, but take that extra 30 minutes or 50 minutes. Take the extra 15 minutes to just look at the customer as a brand, as a founder, as a person, as a vision, and then as how it fits in the market, and then bring in the frameworks and the more standardized processes.
Yeah, I love that. That's so helpful. And thank you for sharing it. And I guess to round us off, my question for you is, as we get to the tail end, what is your big dream for Vertigo? What is your big dream for Vertigo?
Uh, wow. I don't know. I I have so many dreams.
And don't stop dreaming. I love a dream. Don't stop
I
dreaming. Mm,
don't know. Like I I don't want I almost don't want to say because I don't want to jinx it, you know? I don't know what it could end up being. For now, it's a connector between investors and startups. Hopefully, we could start running our own investment rounds or hosting them because I know that there's a lot of
mm,
legal concerns that I'm yet not familiar with.
mhm,
Perhaps it becoming an accelerator, perhaps even a VC, but I any progress that Vertigo makes will always be with the startups and the investors and its customers in mind or its
mhm.
audience in mind. It will never give up like that added value for for more revenue or for diversifying revenue streams.
Of course, you'll be
Like
focused.
I'd rather shut it down and just have it be a podcast than do that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. The intention is to really be of service to the people for whom it was intended for, and doing that to the
And
best.
no, and the intention is to maintain that founder psychology thesis.
Hmm.
And when things get too big, you cannot look at people or businesses individually. But I don't know. That's the thing. Like I don't know where it's gonna go. I don't know. Because I'm also tapping into an industry that I've been avoiding for a really long time, which is finance, you know? So I don't
Why would you avoid? I mean, I think you spoke about this earlier, which is for you. I mean, part of it is about the founder, the story, and the essence of that, rather than.
I don't think there's any soul in finance. But Vertigo is about bringing soul to finance.
Oh,
So
oh,
yeah.
oh! I love that. Last question. You're a
Yeah.
woman of many talents. When are we getting? So I know you, of course, you used to do opera. You can sing. You play the guitar. You play the piano. In conjunction to Vertigo, are we going to get a mixtape or an EP of some sort at any
Yeah.
point from you?
Yes. Yes. It's my passion. Haven't let it go. It's my therapy. I've been working with a bunch of producers and hopefully we like get something out.
Yeah,
But it's very much something I do I that I don't stop doing and that at some point in my life something I'm gonna release something.
yeah.
But it's pretty much like something I do for fun. Or maybe not, we'll see. But yeah.
I love that, and we hope to hear it soon. But i- in summary, thank you so much for the work that you do. I think when you interviewed me, I really enjoyed the level of detail you went into digging, and by digging about the psychology, because often sometimes you get invited to an interview and it's kind of not that it's surface level, but you really went into digging on thought processes, which was really
Yeah.
really helpful. I think that's kind of the value that adds.
Because what do viewers gain by just retelling what an article about you or about Shonda might say? What do they gain?
Mm,
Nothing.
mm,
Nothing. Even and this is not just with founders, because there's not that much information about you specifically. But when I interviewed the CEO, no, sorry, the CEO of the Americas, former CEO of the Americas, now global head of sales of Bentley, for example, in Georgetown,
mhm.
there's countless articles about his wit,
Yep. Yes.
his trajectory. And it's okay, but like, what about this person is is interesting for students to hear and is interesting about the person themselves? And how has this person gotten to where they are and why do they choose to do a podcast company, for example? Like I think that's where real value lies, no? Like
Hmm.
understanding the why of people, you know?
What's your why?
Oh my God. My why. I think I said it before. Bringing, making people feel special, because in many occasions, especially while I was growing up, I didn't feel I didn't have the resources to feel special, and to
Mm,
feel like yeah, that I could think differently, like I was, and to feel that I could do things, um, both as a girl, but also just as an as a weird thinker. So
mm,
I want people to be able to feel comfortable and feel inspired in thinking differently and thinking out of the box. Because a lot of times, more often than not, we're scolded for thinking out of the box, you know?
where we should encourage more of it.
Absolutely. And I love it. Think outside the box. There's even a term for it.
I hate boxes. I hate boxes, which is also, I mean, on the last point, which is why I don't like definitions sometimes, because definitions of a person to say you are a this or a that, it's kind of can be very limiting. Um, so I always err on the side of caution when people frame and say things like, "Oh, you are a entrepreneur." Yes, I am. I do entrepreneur. Rather, I do entrepreneurship. But when you just define me as one thing, it's like, what if 10 years from now I want to do something different in conjunction to this? And how do you define me? So I like to always be very careful about definitions.
Yeah.
But we could go on speaking forever. And I know you
Oh
know.
yeah. No, about we could talk about like the insurgence of personal brands, and how that might be a whole other definition. Oh, trust me, I've had so many like like rabbit holes of thinking about personal branding, or branding a specific person, something. Um, yeah, like we let's avoid that rabbit hole, shall we?
Yeah. But thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And I wish you all the best, and keep doing what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dumi. I'm so excited to hear how your venture keeps going. I really liked the idea. And most of all, I vouch for your founder psychology, because you take things on with enthusiasm. You take projects on as an extension to your passion, to your life. Your team, people that you onboard share that positivity when and it really reflects on your work. It reflects on your brand, on its colors, everything.
Thank you so
So
much.
thank you for interviewing me. I feel so it's an ego boost for me.
You're the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into Transformation Tales. We hope these stories inspired you to keep creating and sharing your voice with the world. Remember, every storyteller's journey is unique, but the courage to start and persist unites us all. Join us next week for more empowering tales of transformation.